The assassin's hesitation. The quiet hum of the negotiation chamber carried an undertone of tension. Khazra, one of the galaxy's most infamous assassins, lounged in the shadowed corner of the room, his 8 tentacles draped casually around him. His bioluminescent patches glowed faintly, betraying his amusement at the ludicrousness of the proposal presented to him. Across the table sat a crystalline hegemony representative, their sharp-edged form shimmering faintly in irritation. "Eliminate the human diplomatic delegation," the hegemony representative repeated, their tone clipped and impatient. Khazra's laugh, a deep, resonating vibration, filled the chamber. "Triple the standard fee, you say?" he asked, his glowing patches flickering in a pattern that translated roughly to polite disbelief. The representative's crystalline matrix dimmed in annoyance. "Yes, humans are dangerous, but surely not beyond the capabilities of the most renowned assassin in the Spiral Arms." Khazra straightened, his eyes narrowing. "Dangerous? That is an understatement. Do you even understand what you're asking me to do?" The representative hummed in impatience, their translucent layers rippling. "They are merely Deathworlders. Surely you exaggerate their difficulty." Khazra leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows across the polished floor. His tone was calm, professional, but laced with the weight of someone who had seen far too much. "Let me explain why this is not a contract I will accept," he began, his tentacles weaving through the air in an intricate pattern. "And perhaps by the time I'm finished, you'll understand why I suggest you reconsider your approach entirely." The unforgettable encounter. 2 cycles ago, Khazra began, his voice steady, I accepted a contract that appeared straightforward. The target was an Arxan trade minister, an unremarkable photosynthetic being with predictable habits and known vulnerabilities. It should have been routine. I prepared meticulously, priming the atmospheric processors with oxidizing agents that would silently incapacitate the target during their evening meditation. The crystalline representative leaned forward slightly, intrigued despite their growing frustration. "And yet," Khazra continued, "the operation failed spectacularly. Not because of the target, mind you, but because of an unforeseen variable, a human security consultant." The representative's crystal matrix hummed in disbelief. "A single human?" Khazra's bioluminescence pulsed in what could only be described as professional appreciation. Her exact words, when she discovered my presence, were, "That corner is exhibiting suspicious levels of emptiness." The representative faltered. "Suspicious? Emptiness?" Khazra nodded. "Indeed. Despite my state-of-the-art channelionic coding, thermal masking technology, and complete environmental control, this human detected my presence by identifying the absence of something her mind expected to be there." He paused for effect, letting the absurdity of the scenario sink in before continuing. Her next move was equally baffling. She conducted a field test of her hypothesis by tossing a cup of heated caffeine solution, what humans refer to as coffee, into the empty corner where I was stationed. The chemical reaction with my channelionic coating rendered my camouflage useless. The representative's crystalline surface flickered in what Khazra recognized as incredulity. "Surely a liquid coolant." "It did," Khazra interrupted, his tone sharp. "The resulting reaction not only exposed me but disrupted my biotech systems." I later learned that she referred to this decision as acting on a hunch, a deadly perspective. Khazra shifted slightly, his tentacles curling inward as if to emphasize the weight of his next words. What happened next was even more extraordinary. Upon seeing me, a fully armed Vaspra assassin, a species universally regarded as apex predators, her immediate response was enthusiasm. The representative's resonance faltered. Enthusiasm. Her exact words were, "Finally, a chance to pressure test those octopus wrestling techniques from last week's seminar." She then proceeded to engage me in what humans call unarmed combat. It was not entirely unpleasant. The representative vibrated with what Khazra recognized as barely contained disbelief. "You expect me to believe Khazra raised a tentacle to silence them. Understand this. Humans do not react to danger the way other species do. Where most beings retreat, humans confront. Where most seek safety, they seek opportunity. That security consultant not only incapacitated me, but then spent 6 hours interrogating me over shared coffee, critiquing my assassination methods, and offering suggestions for improvement. The lessons learned. Khazra activated a holographic display, flooding the chamber with detailed data points and vivid imagery. Since that encounter, I have dedicated considerable time to studying human behavior. What I've discovered is unsettling. Humans possess a concept they call Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. But they do not fear this principle. Instead, they embrace it as a challenge, preparing for contingencies others would never consider. The hologram shifted to display statistics. In the last standard cycle alone, there have been 27 documented assassination attempts on human diplomatic personnel. Not a single one succeeded. The representative's crystal lattice dimmed further, their resonance tinged with unease. Not one. Khazra's bioluminescence brightened. Not one. And in every case, the humans use the failed attempts as learning opportunities. They even maintain a database of these incidents, which they call lessons learned. It is an integral part of their training protocols. The human factor. Khazra gestured again, and the hologram displayed a human instructor addressing a group of trainees. "Observe," he said, playing the recording. The instructor's voice rang out clearly. "Remember, people, assassination attempts are not just threats. They're opportunities to improve. Step 1. Survive. Step 2. Analyze. Step 3. Ensure the enemy deeply regrets their choices. Any questions?" A trainee raised their hand. "What if we don't survive?" The instructor grinned. "Then you failed step 1, and we'll analyze that failure for you." Khazra paused the recording, letting the room settle into silence. "This is what you're dealing with," he said, his tone measured. "A species that turns every threat into a tool for self-improvement. They are chaos incarnate, and any attempt to eliminate them only makes them stronger." A professional refusal. Khazra turned his gaze back to the hegemony representative, who now sat completely still, their crystalline form dim and subdued. "Do you see now why I must decline your contract?" he asked. "Humans are not just dangerous. They are impossible. They turn assassins into collaborators, threats into opportunities, and enemies into allies. Attempting to eliminate them is not just a risk, it is a guarantee of failure." The representative remained silent for a long moment before finally humming in reluctant agreement. "Your insights are disturbing but compelling. I will relay this to the council." Khazra inclined his head, his bioluminescent patches flickering in a pattern that conveyed both amusement and professional respect. "A wise decision. Oh, and one final piece of advice. When you do meet with the humans, bring coffee. They consider it a gesture of goodwill. Just be prepared. They drink it at temperatures that would violate most interstellar safety standards." As the representative left, Khazra leaned back in his seat, a faint smile curling across his features. Humans were chaos personified, but they were also endlessly fascinating. In their defiance of the universe's order, they had earned his respect and his refusal. Murphy's Law in action. Khazra leaned back into his seat, watching as the hegemony representative left the chamber. The crystalline being's dim glow and resigned posture revealed the depth of their unease. Khazra could hardly blame them. Humanity was a subject that defied simple logic. A chaotic species, thriving where others faltered, embracing unpredictability with an almost reckless enthusiasm. For an assassin like Khazra, who prided himself on precision, the humans were an anomaly that demanded study. Murphy's Law. A way of life. Khazra's mind drifted back to his first real encounter with humans. He hadn't believed in the so-called human factor at first. It sounded absurd. Stories of a species that weaponized chaos, whose unpredictable nature had become a survival strategy. But after his fateful encounter with the human security consultant, Kazra had been forced to reconsider. Murphy's Law, anything that can go wrong will go wrong, was not just a principle for humans. It was the cornerstone of their existence. Instead of fearing it, they had turned it into a challenge. It was their way of acknowledging the universe's inherent unpredictability and preparing for it in ways no other species could. The conference incident. One of the most illustrative examples of Murphy's Law in action occurred at the Galactic Diplomatic Summit 3 years ago. Kazra had been present, though not as an assassin. He had been hired as a security consultant for a neutral third party, a rare but lucrative side gig for someone in his line of work. The summit had brought together representatives from dozens of species, including the human delegation. The human delegation, led by Ambassador Emily Chen, had arrived with what Kazra initially dismissed as an over-the-top security detail. They had their own food testers, drones scanning the environment for pathogens, and even an engineer to monitor atmospheric conditions in the meeting chambers. Kazra had quietly mocked their paranoia at first, but then the sabotage began. An unknown party had infiltrated the summit with the intent to disrupt the negotiations. The attack was precise and multi-pronged. A toxin was introduced into the ventilation system, security drones were reprogrammed to target the delegates, and explosive devices were planted in the facility's foundation. Kazra had watched in astonishment as the humans not only survived but thrived amidst the chaos. "We expected this," Ambassador Chen had said calmly as her team donned gas masks the moment the toxins were detected. Murphy's Law. While the other species panicked, the humans acted with practiced efficiency. They neutralized the toxin within minutes, using portable air filtration units they had brought just in case. When the rogue drones activated, their security team responded with what Kazra could only describe as gleeful precision, hacking into the drones and reprogramming them to attack the saboteurs. The explosives. The humans had already identified them during a pre-event sweep, having anticipated that the summit's location, a refurbished orbital station, might have hidden vulnerabilities. Instead of disarming them outright, they had rigged a countercharge system, ensuring the devices would fail to detonate. By the end of the summit, the humans were not only unharmed but had uncovered the saboteurs and turned them over to the Galactic Council. Kazra had been left speechless, his professional pride wounded. The resourcefulness of chaos. Kazra replayed the incident in his mind, analyzing every detail. What struck him most wasn't the humans' preparedness, though that alone was impressive, but their ability to adapt when things didn't go according to plan. He remembered a specific moment during the drone attack when a human engineer had improvised a defense system using nothing but spare parts and a roll of duct tape. The resulting device had effectively fried the rogue drone circuits. "You just carry duct tape with you?" Kazra had asked the engineer afterward. "Of course," she had replied with a grin. "Duct tape fixes everything. It's a staple of human ingenuity." Kazra had learned that this wasn't a joke. Humans had a way of turning even the most mundane items into tools of survival. Where other species relied on specialized equipment, humans thrived on improvisation. The Proxima Incident. Another instance of human adaptability came during the Proxima trade dispute, a case that had fascinated Kazra for years. A human agricultural consultant, Dr. Aaron Patel, had been targeted for assassination after uncovering corruption in an interstellar trade agreement. The assassin, a highly trained operative from the Center Consortium, had expected an easy target. Dr. Patel was, after all, a civilian. What they hadn't accounted for was the human tendency to assume the worst and prepare accordingly. Dr. Patel's office was a fortress. Every piece of furniture, from his desk to his chair, had been reinforced with ballistic-grade materials. His communication devices were encrypted with protocols designed by Earth's most paranoid cybersecurity experts. And his personal vehicle, it was equipped with an automated counter-surveillance system that could track, jam, and disable potential threats. When the assassin finally made their move, sneaking into Patel's office late at night, they found themselves trapped in what could only be described as a nightmare scenario. Patil's security system had detected their presence the moment they breached the perimeter. Rather than call for backup, the system activated a series of non-lethal deterrents, including high-frequency sound waves, blinding lights, and a robotic arm that sprayed the intruder with a viscous adhesive. By the time local authorities arrived, the assassin was immobilized, humiliated, and requesting immediate extraction. The aftermath was even more remarkable. Instead of simply increasing security, Dr. Patil used the incident as an opportunity to expose the Center Consortium's corruption. He followed the money trail, uncovering a web of illegal activities that led to the dissolution of the consortium itself. The universal lesson. Khazra often wondered how a species so prone to chaos had managed to survive, let alone thrive, in a galaxy that often punished unpredictability. The answer, he realized, was simple. Humans had learned to make chaos their ally. Their resilience wasn't just a product of their environment. It was a mindset. They assumed the universe was out to get them and responded by preparing for every conceivable contingency. When those preparations failed, they adapted. And when they adapted, they improved. For Khazra, this was a revelation. As an assassin, he had always relied on control, precision, and planning. But humans didn't just embrace chaos. They weaponized it. Khazra's reflection. As he sat in the quiet of his chamber, Khazra reviewed the data he had collected on humans over the years. The stories were endless. The human diplomat who diffused a hostage situation with nothing but a harmonica and a bag of candy. The engineer who built a fully functional communications array out of scrap metal and discarded power cells. The soldier who turned a losing battle into a victory by convincing the enemy their position was booby-trapped. Khazra shook his head, his bioluminescent patches flickering with a mixture of amusement and admiration. "They're not just impossible targets," he muttered to himself. "They're impossible to predict." He leaned back, a faint smile curling across his features. The hegemony representative's request had been absurd, but it had also been an opportunity, a chance to reflect on the nature of humanity and the lessons they offered. Perhaps, he mused, the galaxy could learn a thing or two from them. The art of paranoid optimization. Khazra reclined in his private quarters, the soft hum of his ship's engines a soothing background melody to his thoughts. The humans had turned into a fixation, an enigma that defied logic and shattered assumptions. If chaos was a storm, humanity had learned to harness it like a seasoned sailor, steering their ship through the wildest tempests with reckless confidence. It wasn't luck. It was something far more deliberate. Khazra had studied many species in his long career, but humans were the only ones who treated survival as both an art form and a science. They had coined a phrase for it: paranoid optimization. It was the process of assuming the universe was actively conspiring against you and preparing accordingly. Khazra had come to realize that this mindset wasn't just a quirk, it was the key to their survival. The paranoid mindset. Paranoia, in most species, was a psychological flaw, a debilitating condition that led to irrational fear and impaired judgment. But for humans, it was a finely tuned survival mechanism. Khazra recalled reading a human philosopher's quote, "Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst." Humans didn't merely hope to survive. They strategized, anticipated, and tested every conceivable scenario. Their approach to survival was systematic and exhaustive, bordering on obsessive. Khazra often wondered if their chaotic homeworld had bred this trait into their DNA. It was as if they viewed the universe as an adversary, an unpredictable force that could strike at any moment. And rather than fear it, they embraced the challenge. The Red Team exercise. One of the most fascinating aspects of humanity's paranoid optimization was their practice of Red Team exercises. Khazra had learned of this during a consultation with a human intelligence officer named Captain Mara Collins. "We actively try to break our own systems," Captain Collins had explained, her expression one of pride. "It's the only way to stay ahead of the curve." The concept was simple yet ingenious. Humans would divide their teams into two groups. the blue team, responsible for defending a given asset, and the red team, tasked with finding and exploiting vulnerabilities. These exercises weren't limited to military operations. They extended to diplomacy, infrastructure, cybersecurity, and even personal safety protocols. Khazra had been fascinated by one particular red team exercise that involved a simulated assassination attempt on a high-ranking diplomat. "We made it a game," Captain Collins had said, laughing. The red team managed to sneak a fake explosive into the conference room. The blue team caught it just before detonation, but it was close. We learned a lot from that one. Khazra had been astounded. Most species viewed failure as a source of shame. Humans, on the other hand, celebrated it as a learning opportunity. They didn't just prepare for failure. They planned for it, dissected it, and emerged stronger every time. The bug-out bag mentality. Another aspect of humanity's paranoid optimization was their obsession with preparedness. Khazra had encountered this firsthand during his time shadowing a human survivalist named Elena Navarro. Elena had introduced him to the concept of a bug-out bag, a portable kit containing essential items for surviving emergencies. "You never know when disaster will strike," she had said, her tone matter-of-fact. "So you plan for everything." Her bug-out bag was a marvel of human ingenuity. It contained food rations, water purification tablets, a multi-tool, thermal blankets, a portable solar charger, medical supplies, and even a compact fishing kit. "This is standard," Elena had explained. "But if you want to get serious, you add things like a foldable shelter, a Geiger counter, and a book on edible plants." Khazra had been incredulous. "You carry this with you at all times?" Elena had laughed. "Of course not. I have 3, one at home, one in my car, and one at work. Always be prepared, right?" Khazra had thought it absurd at the time, but he couldn't deny the logic. Humans assumed the worst-case scenario and prepared for it with almost religious dedication. The impossible escape. One story that encapsulated humanity's paranoid optimization was the infamous impossible escape of Commander Isaac Hayes during the Draxan conflict. Commander Hayes had been captured by the Draxan Collective, a ruthless species known for their brutality. His cell was impenetrable, guarded by layers of bioelectric barriers, and monitored by advanced AI systems. Escape was deemed impossible. But Hayes had other ideas. Using nothing but the limited resources in his cell, he began to plan. First, he dismantled his uniform's metallic insignia, using it to short-circuit a nearby power conduit. The resulting surge temporarily disabled the surveillance system, giving him a window of opportunity. Next, he used the cell's food dispenser, a rudimentary machine that synthesized nutrient blocks, to create a corrosive compound. The compound wasn't strong enough to break through the bioelectric barrier, but it weakened the structural integrity of the cell's energy conduit. Finally, Hayes timed his escape during a scheduled power redistribution cycle. Using his improvised tools, he disrupted the energy flow just enough to overload the barrier system, creating a gap large enough to slip through. By the time the Draxans realized what had happened, Hayes had not only escaped, but had also sabotaged their communications array and stolen critical data from their mainframe. Adapting to adaptation. Khazra had studied the Hayes incident in detail, marveling at the sheer audacity and ingenuity it required. What struck him most was that Hayes hadn't succeeded because he was stronger or faster than his captors. He had succeeded because he was prepared to think outside the constraints of the situation. This was the essence of humanity's paranoid optimization, the ability to adapt to adaptation itself. Where other species relied on brute strength or advanced technology, humans relied on their wits, creativity, and relentless determination. Khazra's own experiment. Intrigued by these stories, Khazra had conducted his own experiment. He had arranged a mock scenario, posing as a human security consultant and presenting a hypothetical assassination attempt to a group of human trainees. The results had been both enlightening and unsettling. Within minutes, the trainees had dissected his plan, identifying weaknesses he hadn't even considered. They proposed countermeasures that ranged from practical, increased surveillance and redundancy, to absurdly creative, training carrier pigeons to deliver counterintelligence. One trainee had even suggested weaponizing the assassination attempt itself, using it as a pretext to infiltrate the enemy's operations. Khazra had left the exercise with a newfound respect and a healthy dose of apprehension. The universal takeaway. As Khazra sat in his quarters, reflecting on these lessons, he realized that humanity's approach to survival wasn't just about protecting themselves. It was about thriving in a universe that seemed intent on testing their limits. They didn't just adapt to chaos. They embraced it, learned from it, and emerged stronger every time. Khazra's bioluminescent patches flickered softly as he composed a note to himself. Never underestimate a species that prepares for failure as if it's inevitable and views chaos as an ally. They are not targets. They are survivors. The unstoppable force of friendship. Khazra had always viewed alliances as transactional. In his line of work, relationships were built on mutual benefit or carefully calculated leverage. Trust, in his world, was a vulnerability, an exploitable weakness that no self-respecting assassin could afford. Yet the more he studied humans, the more he found himself confounded by one of their greatest strengths, their relentless, almost reckless pursuit of connection. Humans, he realized, didn't just survive chaos. They thrived in it because they refused to face it alone. And they had a way of turning even their enemies into allies, forging bonds that no spreadsheet or algorithm could predict. A strange alliance. Khazra's thoughts drifted to a widely documented incident known as the Andar Accord. The Andar system had been embroiled in conflict for decades, with 3 dominant species vying for control of its rich mineral resources. Skirmishes were constant, treaties were fleeting, and assassination attempts were so frequent they were considered part of daily life. Enter the humans. The Galactic Federation had sent a delegation of human diplomats to mediate peace talks, led by a man named Ambassador Rajesh Malik. At first, no one took the humans seriously. They were latecomers to the galactic stage, and their Deathworld reputation preceded them. To many, humans were brutish survivalists, barely more civilized than the predators of their homeworld. But Malik had a different approach. Instead of focusing on demands and ultimatums, he started with something seemingly trivial: a meal, the universal language of food. Malik invited representatives from all 3 factions to join him for what he called a diplomatic dinner. The Andarians, renowned for their carnivorous diets, were horrified when they saw Malik's delegation serve vegetarian dishes. But their horror quickly turned to fascination when they learned that the dishes were crafted from plants grown in nutrient-deficient soil, plants that had been genetically engineered to thrive in environments worse than the barren moons of Andar. If we can grow food in the deserts of Earth, Malik said, imagine what we could grow here together. It was a simple gesture, but it broke through years of mistrust. For the first time in decades, representatives from the 3 factions sat at the same table, sharing a meal and engaging in civil conversation. Malik had understood something the others hadn't. Survival wasn't just about resources. It was about relationships. Turning enemies into allies. Khazra had found this story perplexing. Diplomacy, in his experience, was a game of power and leverage. Yet humans approached it with a kind of raw sincerity that often defied logic. Take the case of Captain Elena Vasquez, a human military officer stationed at the edge of Federation space. Her crew had been ambushed by a pirate fleet during a routine patrol. Outnumbered and outgunned, Vasquez did something no one expected. She hailed the pirate leader and offered to share supplies. The pirates, baffled by the gesture, agreed to parley. What followed was a 2-hour conversation in which Vasquez convinced the pirate leader, a Ytharn named Surik, to turn his fleet into a legitimate transport operation. Why steal when you can be paid more to protect? Vasquez had argued, showing Surik the profitability of legal trade routes. By the end of the encounter, Not only had Vasquez secured her crew's safety, but she had also gained a new ally in the Ytharn fleet. Sarek's former pirates would later assist in repelling an invasion from the Outer Rim, earning recognition from the Galactic Federation. The human need for connection. Khazra began to see a pattern. Humans had an innate ability to connect with others, even those who sought to harm them. It wasn't just their adaptability that set them apart, it was their capacity for empathy. He recalled a conversation he'd had with a human psychologist, Dr. Lena Armitage, who had been studying interspecies relations. Humans are social creatures, Dr. Armitage had explained. Our survival has always depended on cooperation. Even our most advanced technologies, spacecraft, AI, medical innovations, were born from collaboration. Khazra had raised a skeptical tentacle. And yet, your history is riddled with conflict. Dr. Armitage had smiled faintly. True, but even in our darkest moments, we've sought connection. It's in our nature to find common ground, to reach out. That's why we're so good at making allies, even when it seems impossible. The curious case of the Sithari conflict. One of the most bizarre examples of this occurred during the Sithari conflict. The Sithari were an aquatic species known for their isolationist tendencies. When the Federation attempted to establish a research station near Sithari territory, tensions escalated into open hostility. The Federation dispatched a human negotiator, Commander Sarah Blake, to de-escalate the situation. Blake's first meeting with the Sithari leader, High Chancellor Lirith, did not go well. The Sithari, offended by the Federation's perceived intrusion, refused to speak directly with Blake. Instead, they sent emissaries with cryptic, almost nonsensical demands. Most negotiators would have given up. Blake, however, decided to take a different approach. She spent weeks studying the Sithari's cultural history, eventually uncovering a fascination with storytelling. At the next meeting, instead of delivering counterarguments, Blake told a story, a human folktale about a fisherman who befriends a sea serpent. The Sithari delegation was captivated. Over the following weeks, Blake used storytelling as a bridge, weaving narratives that resonated with the Sithari's values and traditions. By the end of the negotiations, the Sithari not only agreed to the research station, but also offered to assist with marine exploration projects. Khazra found this baffling. She turned a territorial conflict into a partnership through stories. Humans, he realized, had a unique ability to see the world through others' eyes. Where most species sought dominance, humans sought understanding. Khazra's realization. As Khazra reflected on these stories, he began to see the larger picture. Humanity's resilience wasn't just about surviving chaos. It was about thriving within it by building bridges. They didn't view relationships as transactional. They viewed them as transformational. Their willingness to collaborate, even with those who opposed them, was a strength no other species could replicate. It was why they succeeded where others failed. Khazra's bioluminescent patches glowed softly as he made a mental note. Never underestimate a species that can turn enemies into allies with nothing more than a meal, a story, or a shared purpose. The final thought. Khazra couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration. Humans were far from perfect, but their imperfections were part of what made them extraordinary. They weren't just survivors. They were connectors, builders, and dreamers. And perhaps, Khazra thought, the galaxy could use a bit more of that.